Hi, I'm David Noble. This is the 9 o'clock meeting, the segment I do occasionally where I'll get together with another YouTuber and we'll randomly talk about some specific subject or other. This week I have Nyasha on the channel again from Quickstop F1 and Verbal Reasoning. So, man of many skills.
Hello, how's it going? Nice to see you again. Nice to be back for a lovely chat. What else would I like to do on a Friday night? So thank you.
Oh, happy to have you here again. It's very different to the last time you were on the channel, isn't it? I mean,
when was I on last time then? Was it before the season?
It was about April time, mate.
Was it April?
Because you were at the end of it, you were busy congratulating me on how well Ferrari were doing and whether Charles might win the title this year.
Wow.
And now we're here discussing, can Mercedes challenge Ferrari for second place? Which, when I first discussed this as an idea about 2 races ago, you know, there wasn't that much between them, and Mercedes were like on the ascendancy. They were more consistently getting results. So it seemed like a whole better conversation than it perhaps does now.
I mean,
I forget.
The recent God, being a Mercedes fan this year is like, honestly, it's the hope that kills you. And then it's like every time you think, oh, we've turned the corner, and then something bad happens. And recently, all of the contact that our drivers are having at races, or bad luck or bad strategy, it's just, not great. I'll be honest.
I have 2 things to say to that.
Yeah.
One is, you know that whole meme thing of like, first time where he's like in the hangman's noose.
Yeah.
You're experiencing what it's like to be a Ferrari fan.
Yeah.
The second thing is, how privileged have you guys been for the past few years that you can have sometimes the second best race car and think you're having a bad year?
Look, Arsene Wenger had.
I mean, so many teams wish that was their definition of bad.
Oh no, for sure. But look, Arsene Wenger had a great saying. I'll always remember it. He said, "If you're used to eating caviar every day, it's hard to go to sausages." And right now, we're munching on frozen Richmond sausages. It is not. It is not caviar. Okay, bring back the caviar. But until then,
I wouldn't know what to do with caviar, to be honest with you.
To me neither. I've seen a video about it the other day actually, and quite interesting, but still for me, not something I'm seeking out anytime soon or able to afford. Let's be honest. So, but no, this season's been it's been a weird one. I think after the ups and downs and twists and turns of last year, I think going post summer break really has been a procession of sorts for Red Bull, and it's fair play to them. I mean, everything aside, you know, they've built a car that is absolutely mad, and you know, in Formula One, it's up to people to catch up to that. Now, obviously, how they
the thing with Red Bull at the minute though is they've got the speed, they've got the consistency, and their team are doing the whole job. You know, they've got like the 3 things you need to have to win the championship. But it's like, if you look at Mercedes, for the most part, in terms of results, they've been quite consistent. It's the tortoise and the hare thing. They don't necessarily have the speed, but they've continually been getting results. If you look at Ferrari, they've had the speed, but they don't have the consistency and they don't have the...
No, they don't. I guess it's that team efficiency, I guess I would put it, you know, in terms of strategy and I guess the development of the car after the summer break. It's just, you know, unfortunately not been there. But, you know, I guess Ferrari will probably rue all of those missed opportunities at the beginning of the season that would have made it tighter, and then maybe, you know, some of the results this in the, you know, second half, you know, maybe there's a different pressure on Red Bull, and, you know, and so forth. But yeah, Ferrari really did on all sides first half of the season. I mean, there was that run of races where it just felt like for 6-7 races, either the driver fucked it, also either the driver messed up, or the team messed up. And it's just, you know, when you're fighting for a championship, yeah, you might be able to make one mistake or two mistakes, but you can't make that many mistakes.
But I mean, I think they worked out Charles cost himself 25 points for the win, plus about 6 points, because realistically he was only really on for third in Imola.
Yeah.
So maybe 32 to 36 points he's cost himself.
Mm.
But then if you think over the course of a season, for a driver to only make 2 mistakes, it's not actually that shocking. I mean, I worked out, we always sort of have this thing with Charles, like he's very fast, but sometimes leaves himself open for mistakes. Some of that is to do with the equipment, because if you're permanently overdriving the equipment, you are going to leave yourself more open to it. But I was looking at the statistics for the drivers and stuff. Charles had 3 retirements, 2 of them are engine related.
Yeah.
Carlos, who I thought was like their answer to Checo Perez, as in not perhaps the quickest single lap guy out there, but pretty consistent.
Yeah.
5 retirements, 3 of them his fault.
Wow.
Or 3 of them crashes at least. Because, you know, Imola, I think it was, he had the crash in quali that then put him in the trouble zone to get hit.
Yeah.
But it's sort of weird how, you know, the guy you'd think would be the consistent one, the more experienced one, or whatever, the one you normally put your money on to bring the car home, is having a harder season than Charles. But everyone's still on Charles's case about how, you know, he gets involved in too many incidents. Well, apparently not.
Yeah, you know, but F1 is like that, right? It is a bit of a narrative. I mean, sport in general, right? Narrative is easier to spin than, you know, than facts and fiction, I guess. And I guess with the history of Charles and you know, from when he came in at Sauber, you know, just small mistakes. And I think with Charles, what happens is when you have the potential that he has, and you have the talent that he has, it's almost like the discrepancy between his talent and, you know, his ability to make a mistake are so far wide that, you know, it's almost more visceral when it happens for Charles than when it happens for Carlos. But, you know, at the same time, what's this now? This is his 5th season. I think
third with Ferrari, and he had one with Sauber.
Yeah, right. So 2018. Yeah. So, I mean, Verstappen in his 4th season, I remember. I think it was the 4th season. Maybe was having all of those shunts. That I think if you look at the beginning of the 2018 season, where he was getting into incidents and, you know, seemed to be tagging Vettel all the time, and, you know, Verstappen had to go through that growing phase, and Charles will as well. And I've got no doubt that Charles will come out the other side if given a car. I think Charles will make a very good go at winning a title. I think he's got the 1 lap pace clearly, and I would like to see him in a car that is better in a race than this year's Ferrari, because it's hard to judge when someone's tires seem to get chewed up after 4 laps or so. So yeah, but Charles is great. Carlos, again, a lot of this stuff, if I'm right, I mean, I guess the last race he did spin out, I guess, aquaplaning, but it felt like, again, had a difficult start to the season and seemed to pick up as the season went on. And then obviously, you know, we had the incident in Japan, which could have happened to anyone, I guess. And it was unfortunate.
a certain amount of bad luck because a river is a river going across the track. It just happened to catch him. But it's not helped his reputation. I mean, the thing is, Ferrari apparently spent a lot of the year, ironically, developing the car more towards Carlos because they wanted to basically help both drivers, which then hindered Charles. And then it's what's going on? Because if you look at the flip side of Red Bull, it's like they know where the basket their eggs need to be in as far as they're concerned. But Ferrari is so intent on trying to give both drivers equal opportunity that they're hindering one of their own drivers. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't make any sense, David. And I think I remember when I was on a podcast with Vincenzo Landino, and he was saying, I think in Miami times, I think he was saying, why are we not focusing on Charles? Why are we not throwing everything behind Charles? He's the one that's going to win us this championship. And Binotto just absolutely refused. And I feel as if that was probably the first big mistake the Ferrari team made this season, was not throwing everything behind the Charles Leclerc championship. Some of the strategy calls, I mean, Austria, I remember Charles being a lot quicker than Carlos, I think, and asking to be let by. Austria spin race, maybe. And obviously, how they engineered it for, I don't know, but how Carlos ended up, he was lucky with the pit stop, but, Charles was calling for strategy calls way earlier in that race that would have helped him in Silverstone, sorry. So, and then just, like you say, developing the car away from someone who is putting it on pole position. Let's give him the best possible race car to go out and see this through. And they didn't. And we'll see next season if there's a shift in that. If you look at what Red Bull are doing, that's where it's going. There'll be questions around Mercedes next season if there's a good car, and they're able to start equal footing. If one driver gets ahead, are Mercedes going to stick to, both drivers, or if you're fighting someone who is clearly going to put all their resources behind one driver, are you going to have your teammates take points off each other, basically?
And it's that thing, is you've got to remain fluid to a certain extent, because all three of the top teams, well, maybe not so much with Red Bull, but even then, if you look at 1999 Ferrari, for example, where you had Eddie Irvine, you had Michael Schumacher. Michael Schumacher had his accident at Silverstone, and suddenly Ferrari are left with Eddie Irvine being the guy they've got to win the championship with.
Yeah.
That could always happen.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen so much with modern cars. They are safer or what have you, but it's a possibility. Yeah. So you can't necessarily sacrifice one of your drivers so early on in the season that you're then leaving yourself open to it later. But
I guess not. But in a long title race, I guess summer break is the cutoff point, right? Where you probably look at it at summer and think, okay, this is the position we're in. This is what we need to do. But also, if a driver, really, it's hard if a driver is not mathematically incapable of winning the title. It's hard to kind of say, you need to give that up, especially in a situation where in Ferrari, where it's clearly two drivers on equal footing, and also in Mercedes, where it would appear, on paper, it's two drivers on equal footing. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see next season, A, if there are other drivers in the mix, and B, how those teams react, for sure.
Looking at the driver pairing, something like the top three teams anyway, if you were like a school headmaster, like, I know, interesting thought.
Yeah, I know. Poor kids.
What sort of ranking or what sort of level would you say the drivers we're at in terms of like attainment and what have you. You know, in like an A to F sort of thing.
Are we doing this driver by driver?
Yeah, we'll do it driver by driver.
Oof. Okay, I'd say Verstappen. You're gonna give him an A. I'll give him an A minus. Purely because he's doing this season on easy mode. The car is incredible. He's doing so well, and but there doesn't seem to be much competition. I was saying this on Cameron's podcast the other day. I want to see that boy in the fire again. Okay, I want to see that guy under pressure. We hear him on the radio when things go on. We saw his reaction to what happened in Singapore. I don't, this whole reformed, mature Max thing, I don't see it. I want to see him in the heat of a championship battle with people breathing down his neck, looking to overtake him, or him looking to overtake them. Can he get it done cleanly, or is he going to go back to his old ways? And I think that's an interesting subplot for whenever that happens again. But Verstappen A minus, Checo. Let's say I'll give Checo a B. I'll give Charles a B minus. I'll give Carlos. Sorry, do you want to discuss these? I'm just really well. What would you give Charles?
B plus.
B plus.
Because the thing is, he's had 2 mistakes this year.
Yeah.
There's a limit to what else you can expect him to really do. The car is not on pace with the Red Bulls. The team strategy isn't on pace with the Red Bull. There's a lot of, I don't know what more he could have done. Obviously, France, but
Yeah, it is. I do hear you on that. Okay, we'll give Charles a B plus. We'll give Carlos a C. We'll give him a C. He got a race win, so we'll give him a C. I'll give Lewis up and down season. Look, he had the whole first half.
This one's going to be painful for you, possibly, isn't it?
The first half of the season, we had the testing of the sensors, and obviously his car was, and whatever Mercedes were doing first half of the season, I still think for him to, still bring home decent results, and then like at the back end of the summer break, I think he was in great form. Post summer break, there has been, I would say, erratic wheel-to-wheel racing. Singapore's an absolute mess. There's no excuse for that. So I'm going to give Lewis. I'm going to give both Lewis and George B minuses. Yeah, I do think, to your point with Charles, I think the Mercedes drivers have extracted the most out that they could from the car. And I think there's been some absolutely awful strategy calls at points, especially in the first half of the season. I do think that I would have probably given them a B if these last few races hadn't happened. I think also there's some team element to that as well. But I think they've both been equal. Personally, I don't think either of them have been better than the other greatly. If I'm going to be greatly honest, and I think that's testament to George, because Lewis is still driving at a very high level. And for him to be so close in the qualifying stand, I think it's 10 to, not 10 to, I think he's winning. I think Lewis is winning by 5 now, or 4 or 5. So I don't think Lewis can be beaten in the head-to-head in qualifying. But it's that, I think it'll be interesting to see if George finishes ahead in the points. So yeah, there's my assessment for you.
Yeah, no, so it's difficult to judge the Mercedes boys as well this year, just because of how that car has been. They're working on it on the go, and it took them a long time to try and get to grips with it, and since the summer break, it does seem to have disappeared again in terms of understanding where they're at with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the ironic things about it is it was all this stuff about like the regulation clarification regarding the rules to do with the floor. And everyone thought, well, the one team that was going to have gained out of this would be Mercedes, and that Red Bull would be the ones that would get brought back. And what seems to have happened is Red Bull seems to be the one team that hasn't suffered, and it's Ferrari and Mercedes that seem to have suffered.
It was a bit of a Hail Mary, I think,
Mm.
from Mercedes. Although, you'd never really trust anything that Red Bull say. They were always like, our floor is compliant. So yeah, apparently it is. Although they were running different floors on Checo and Max, so clearly they had to change something. But it doesn't seem to have slowed down. In fact, it reminds me of the. Was there a floor issue last year? Was there a floor issue last year, or was it the flexi wing? What was it last year where
we had flexi wings and stuff last year, didn't we?
I can't remember what it was, but Mercedes appealed against, and maybe it was the wings. And Mercedes appealed against Red Bull's like flexi wing, looking to slow them down, and it didn't slow them down. And I think this is Formula One. People are going to protest, and people are going to try and kind of stop innovation and try and slow their competitors down. Red Bull spent 7-8 years doing the same thing. I don't think it's anything to be necessarily ashamed about, but no, it didn't work. It did not work in the slightest.
That's that thing with there's that saying, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space, and that sort of seems to be the area that F1 designers operate in. So it's like if they're not sort of right on the margin of legality, then the people are always assuming they're going to go over.
Yeah, right. And that's what Formula One's about. It's about pushing the limits. It's about pushing boundaries, understanding regulations, loopholes in regulations. Look abroad in 2009. So I think that's to be celebrated. But obviously, if it's outside of regulations, then it needs to be clamped. But until someone says that it's inside or outside regulations, then we'll go from there. 2 seconds. Sorry, I was just I was beckoning for a drink. I'm parched. This conversation's got me parched. So apologies. Carry on, David.
No, so, I mean, I was looking at the scores before Singapore. I was looking at the scores before Miami to see how stuff had changed.
Yeah.
I mean, freaking Charles Leclerc had a 97 points in Miami with George Russell on 59. Carlos Sainz on 51, Lewis on 36. Well, before Singapore, that had changed to Charles was on 219 compared to George on 203. So to get that percentage of change is huge. It just went so wrong for Ferrari during the midfield, as you were mid-championship, as you were saying. But I think it was like I sort of felt of it or thought of it as a kind of tortoise and the hare thing almost, as in like, I mean, neither team have like particularly done well on strategy. I think Mercedes is so used to having a fast car that sort of covers it and makes up for it. So this year it's sort of highlighted operational issues they perhaps didn't realize they had.
The cracks were there, David. The cracks were there. Let me tell you. I was calling out that strategy team last season. There were some absolute mess ups. Okay.
Howlers.
Yeah, howlers. Okay. France, the decision to let Max Verstappen undercut Lewis Hamilton is criminal. I could argue with Cota there were strategy calls that didn't go. If I want to go into uh, situation, I feel at some point during Abu Dhabi, he could have pitted Lewis. I do think he did an extremely long stint on those tyres. He was running away with it. Max kept stopping, so it did look difficult. But yeah, either way, the writing has always been on the wall for the strategy team. I think they look too much at numbers and they don't look at what's going on enough. They're not instinctive enough, and that's where Red Bull, anything happens, they're there jumping the gun. I would say it's improved for Mercedes, but you're right. Look at Monaco 2019. You know, they had to they left Lewis out on medium tires for like 60 something laps, right? He had Max Verstappen bringing down. Any other circuit, Lewis is getting overtaken, and maybe any other driver, they're getting overtaken. So the writing has always been on the wall, and you're right. They used to have a fast car to bail them out, and they do not now, quite clearly.
What they do have now is reliability, though. Yeah. You know, looking at our list again, you say Shell with his 3 retirements, 2 of them engine related. Carlos 5 retirements, 2 of them are reliability rated. Whereas you guys have only had 2 reliability or 2 retirements all year, pretty much. You know, accident for George. I can't remember what it was.
Accident for Lewis in Belgium.
Yeah. So
yeah. Look, I mean, even I think last year as well were pretty reliable, if I'm not incorrect. Reliability has always been a good thing. I think since 2016, when Lewis had all those cars kind of breaking down, I think he had that record run in the points, didn't he? And the Mercedes is a reliable car. But look, like our good friend Christian Horner said, I'd rather fix a fast, unreliable car than make a slow car go faster, basically.
It's always easy to say that when your car isn't breaking down at the time.
Yeah. I mean, to be
although in fairness, he said that at the start of the season when it was Max having the reliability issues. And
they seem to have fixed that. So, and again, difference to Red Bull and Ferrari. You know, Red Bull fixed those reliability issues or just foisted them onto Checo, and Ferrari, unfortunately, you know, I guess pretty much this maybe a similar amount of stuff, but it happened at an opportunity where those points really hurt the lead that you'd built up when Red Bull were essentially in dumps.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at the first one for Charles, for example, when Max retired, he was in second place in both them races, so he lost 36 points from it, and Charles gained nothing from him retiring. But with Charles retiring, it was from the lead, so there's 25 points lost straight there, plus Max gained 7 for it, so that was a 32-point swing just from one retirement, and it's been that kind of story this year.
Yeah. So what can you do? Are you confident for, I guess, looking forward to next season? You confident that the team can produce a car? I guess the fundamentals of a good car are there, you know. So you're confident they can. I guess the tire wear issue is a big.
What I want to see is Ferrari build a car where Charles Leclerc can qualify on pole, and the car will allow him to finish the race still in the lead.
Yeah. Kind of like a lights to flag situation of, you know, finish pole because, and kind of ride off into the sunset.
His entire Ferrari career is like 2019, 2022. Cars which are fast for short distances.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's like people keep sort of giving him almost grief, or it's like highlighting it as a bad thing, his pole to win record. But the thing is, he's had the same car as his teammates, and his teammates haven't been getting them poles.
No.
So but we know that those Ferraris have been, well, chewing tyres, just not had enough endurance during the race to be able to keep the pace up. Again, it's like I said to you earlier about his performance generally over the season, is there's a limit to what he can do with that equipment.
Very true. Very, very true. I'd love to see him in a title fight. I really would. Well, a prolonged title fight. And to see what he's got, because he's got the talent. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if anyone can catch up to Red Bull. We'll see if whatever comes out of this cost cap saga affects them next year in terms of budget for upgrades and wind tunnel time, etc. So yeah, it'll be interesting.
Man, are we going to talk about the cost cap thing now as you've raised it?
Oh God, might as well.
The will to live just left your face.
You know what? Yeah, I am just tired of being tired. Like the sport. Maybe it's we're in a social media age and the need for stories and clicks and updates and conversation, right? It would have been crazy to, I would have loved what social media would have thought of Prost Senna in Suzuka 89 or 88. Sorry, wait, is it 88 and 89?
89, 90.
89, 90, thank you. I would have loved to kind of see that, how that would have played out on social media. So there's good things, but it's just like an overload of, I feel right now, bad. The FIA, I just think they're a bit of a joke organization, to be honest. And I don't trust that there will, whatever comes out of this, no one's going to be happy.
No.
And I just think it'll be interesting to see how much transparency they give. It'll be interesting to see if Red Bull go into the breach agreement and just take a settlement. But I think for the good of the sport, and not just the fans, the teams, everyone needs to know how much they spent, where it was spent on, where they funneled money to, whatever it was in this minor breach, less than $5 million. Where did that money go? What did they spend it on? And I guess now we know this information, how harsh a penalty they're going to get. It's obviously helped them last season when they were bringing truck after truck after truck after truck of updates. And that's carried on into this season. So, yeah, I'm more just tired of being annoyed at Red Bull and the FIA. Like I spend a lot of my time being annoyed at the FIA and being annoyed at Red Bull. And they just seem to always be on that edge of, the right side of right and wrong. Well, the wrong side of right and wrong, sorry.
There's some interesting thoughts that come from this cost cap thing, though, because the rules about what they can and can't do, the penalties they may give or they may not, are incredibly vague. And it's just like the minor indiscretion. Who set 5% as minor? Because that's a huge amount of money. I mean, when you see what the teams are talking about, that Ferrari and Mercedes are saying they spent last year in total on upgrades, that's nearly that. But then you've got, who made the rules, who clarified them, who agreed and signed them off? Because aren't the teams don't they have a say in, outlining the rules and whatever? So that would mean that in theory, Mercedes and Ferrari okayed these limits.
Well, I guess at the time there was almost maybe an assumption that no one would go over it, and that we wouldn't be here after one season, right? So now we're in the era of precedent, right? This is the precedent being set. What I think is going to happen is, and you're right, you know, there should be more stringent rules, but also you don't forget that the FIA changed the rules on points being awarded based on how many laps are completed. And they didn't tell the teams. It wasn't in the new regulations. So
well, that was the thing I was saying on Twitter, is these whole changes and stuff were put into place after Spa because of how much of a Spa, if they'd have managed to run the last 2 laps and finished under time, even if they'd only done 2 laps, it would have been full points.
It doesn't make sense. It does not make sense.
No.
And for a sport so technological, for a sport so advanced, it is unfathomable that we've spent 2 years operating in this gray area where no one knows. 1 week to the next, different sanctions are given out for different things. And look, as a Ferrari fan, you must be looking at the Checo Perez safety car infringements and that being, the most minor penalty, despite the fact he did it 3 separate times. The fact that Checo Perez cut the chicane in Silverstone, and that seemed to be okay, and he kept a position.
Yeah,
and then
I'm more aggrieved about that, to be honest with you, because it's sort of like with Singapore, it was like the race Checo Perez had. If he'd have ended up getting 10 seconds of penalties and losing the race because of that, as a racing fan, I think I'd have felt for him, because he did every, he screwed up the bloody safety car, something rotten, don't get me wrong, and obviously I would have wanted us to have won it.
Yeah.
But looking at it purely on performance and what they did, yeah, he drove a great, fantastic race. And I can appreciate that. But no, I'd rather have had the points. But that is what it is.
Yeah.
Currently, they have a better package than we do.
Yeah, but the Silverstone one is almost identical to what Nyasha did in Japan, and and it's just look, even in football, right? It's not limited to F1. Even in football, referees day to day, even with the help of a video assistant ref, are making bad calls, right? So that side of things, the sporting side of things, I could take with a grain of salt. What I can't take is regulations being at the forefront of, and rules being at the forefront of discussions for a sport which should have them set in stone. It cannot be, it's been, how long has it been now? It's been 4 or 5 days, 4 days now. How long is this going to take? Like, why does everything take so long to sort out? And that's why we're forced as content creators to keep talking about it, because we don't know what's going to happen. We have no information. They're not telling us what they overspent on, but they know they have overspent. So I just find it like, this is not what we want to be talking about. We want to be talking about on-track action, but the on-track action's been a bit dry, and the off-track action seems to be dominating, and that's where we are at the moment.
Talking good on-track action, then George Russell overtaking in Japan, because he pulled some bloody moves.
He pulled some blinders. Oh, George. What was it? Into turn 3, around the outside of turn 3?
Around that bit, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, he even played a blinder. It's nice to see him do well in the rain as well. He's probably a bit scarred from his Singapore experience. So probably nice to see. It was nice to see him do those moves, be aggressive. And yeah, look, George has that in him. George might come across as, like he wouldn't hurt a fly, but he really does have a steely determination in him. And, he's more, I wouldn't say more than a match. He is a great teammate for Lewis. After, 5 seasons of 5 seasons of Valtteri Bottas.
Valtteri sort of could do the job some of the time in qualifying. At one lap, he's pretty quick, but George can actually kind of do it in the race as well.
Look, his racecraft is a million times better than Valtteri Bottas. Valtteri Bottas, there would be races where he couldn't come through the pack. He would be stuck in traffic. He would be just doing nothing. And there'll be races where, we saw it. Mexico, off the grid, letting Max through. Sochi, 21, where, he just waved Max. I mean, even this season, I've seen him do it for Alfa Romeo. So nothing's changed. His racecraft is honestly, when he got to Mercedes, his racecraft it got highlighted as being quite poor for a driver who's in a top team. And the difference with George is night and day. It is an upgrade. And I'm really happy that he's settled in as well as he has, and he's started as well as he has, because if it hadn't gone well, there would have been calls for him to be replaced, and have Mercedes made a mistake. But he's almost come to Mercedes, almost the finished product. I wouldn't say it's a finished product yet, but he's got I think George will win a title at some point. If Mercedes give him the car and Lewis isn't there, I think he wins a title. And yeah.
Do you think, weirdly, from a driver point of view, that Mercedes have perhaps been, I hesitate to say lucky that they've not had a great car, but it's taken the pressure off the driver dynamic, that it's sort of like they've both just been able to get on with doing their best to the team rather than thinking perhaps too much about the Drivers' Championship?
Yeah.
Because obviously, if you're in a car that's winning and can compete for the title, that very much changes what's going on. I mean, if you look at Lewis and Nico, for example, when they weren't fighting for anything, best friends. And that went downhill very quickly.
I think in equal machinery, Lewis is dusting George very easily. So I don't think that's an issue. And I'm being honest, and people will say at the beginning of the season, George has got more points, but anyone who watches F1 and who reads about F1 and is aware of what happens in F1 and doesn't have an agenda knows that Lewis was compromised for the first 6-7 races, right? And then as soon as they took those sensors off, he's been consistently qualifying ahead of George, and the results have been good. Obviously, back end towards the summer break was good. I think after the summer break, they've been equal. But I think if it's a situation where the car is equal, like the car is good enough to win races from the start of the season, Lewis is dusting George. I think mostly because he'll qualify ahead of George more often than not. And then once you're ahead in qualifying, you're ahead of you're given you're given.
I've had the dog wandering around, so
no, it's fine. You're given better strategy, and you're able to then dictate the race. And I think that will happen too much for George to be considered. Now, what will happen though is the media will, I think what George is in for before there is the inter-team battle, if Mercedes is a car quick enough to win the title and George isn't on par with Lewis, George has to be careful he doesn't start getting the same treatment as Valtteri Bottas. Is he good enough to be in there? Why isn't he challenging Lewis? Because ultimately that's what Valtteri can handle, that pressure of having to be the guy to beat Lewis Hamilton, being the only one standing in front of Lewis Hamilton, especially, look at 2017. Well, that was Seb, but Bottas was nowhere, 2017, 18. But 2019 and 2020, with Valtteri Bottas 2.0, 3.0, he struggled with the pressure of being Lewis's teammate in a title fight. And, it's a bit of a pressure cooker. So I think George needs to be aware of that and don't not let that get to him, rather than focus on trying to beat Lewis.
Yeah. I mean, I said at the start of the year when I was doing my slightly off the wall season review, weirdly about Charles and Lewis. Basically, if it came to a title fight between Mercedes and Ferrari, and they were both fighting for it, I sort of saw Lewis basically having the edge just due to experience, because he's been there, he's been in that situation, he knows what it's like to do that, to win titles and what have you. A sort of similar thing to a certain extent with Mercedes and Lewis and George, I suppose. Lewis knows how to work every scenario, whereas George is still a little bit of a rough diamond at this point.
Yeah, couldn't have put it better myself, right? You know, championship experience counts. I think we saw that in Max versus Lewis towards the end of last year. You know, Max has that now, and some would say Max has taken the next step after that. I think your first title fight is always going to be the hardest in terms of just dealing with it mentally. And I think the experience Lewis has, and also it's Lewis's team, you know, as much as it is like you know, equal partnership, it is Lewis's team, and he's been in there with those people during a title fight and many title fights, right? So I don't. He's in a comfortable environment, let's say, whereas or a more comfortable environment than George will be at that point. Sorry, that's my Adobe
Whose that
Creative.
was?
That was mine. Don't know why my Adobe Creative Cloud decided to do that, but thanks guys. You're ruining my creativity.
So coming into this year with the new regs and stuff, no one entirely sure what was going to happen with the cars, how they were going to develop. Everyone thought because there were going to be a lot of like stock parts and stuff, that a lot of the cars would end up looking very similar. And yet you've got the Red Bull completely different to the Ferrari, completely different to the Mercedes, and even the characteristics of the cars are very different. For example, where you've got the Ferrari that heats its tires up well and is quick for short periods.
Yeah.
The Mercedes, by contrast, that seems to have trouble heating its tires up at all, but when it does, it's an incredibly quick car. And they're just polar opposites almost. It's like if we could take the best parts of Ferrari and the best parts of Mercedes and put them together,
it would be an incredible car. Yeah. Oh, let's take the Mercedes reliability. But
yes.
Yeah, look, that was probably one of my most favorite preseason testings, I must say, seeing all the cars come out. Because obviously no one was showing anything at their launches. Everyone was bringing kind of spec cars to the launches. So what we were seeing at the testing was the cars for the first time. It was in the case of Mercedes, they brought a whole different car to the first testing, which to this day I don't see clearly. Now we've seen what this car is like, see the value in that. But I really enjoyed how different all the cars were. And I just think it's incredible that 10 teams all came up with their own design philosophies. And obviously there were ways in which some teams were similar, of course. But I mean, that Ferrari might be one of my favorite ever F1 cars. I think it is gorgeous. I have never seen any car look like that. It is beautiful. And I just think it's a shame that it's not quicker. or in
it's a bit of a typical Ferrari, really, unfortunately.
Yeah,
I mean, I grew up with like the Ferraris, like the late 80s and the early 90s and stuff, and they had a similar disposition. Beautiful cars, kept breaking down all the time. You know.
So. Yeah, it's yeah, but no, like and let's see. Hopefully, obviously, now we've got set regulations pretty much until 2026. We'll see the cars converge, and I'm sure people will copy stuff of, especially because other than Aston Martin, I've not really seen anyone radically change their philosophy halfway through the season. So it'll be interesting to see what people essentially pull from the Red Bull and try and put onto their own car to try and catch up. It'll be interesting to see if Mercedes stick with this philosophy. They say they know where they went wrong. The proof will be in the pudding for that. And next season they will be closer. Everyone will be closer next season. That's just how regulations go. But Red Bull is so far down the road. That's the problem.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how the changing dynamics goes for like the sliding scale for the aero, how much of an effect that has.
Yes.
So where like the bigger teams can't just throw 200 million at a car.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it will be interesting. Did that come into effect this season, or did it come? Did it come into effect in this preseason testing, or is it starting in the next preseason?
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you. But I mean, so part of the problem is obviously the bigger teams still have the massive resources that they had, and Red Bull still is going to have Adrian Newey one way or another. Although that's one of the interesting rumours about the cost cap, of course, was he technically working for Red Bull engineering something and then sublet to Red Bull Racing? And is that where the confusions come in? That was one of the theories.
I have heard that one. I have that one. But again, Christian Horner denies it. So obviously whatever that guy says is the truth. So yeah, look, Mercedes are going to have more win time. Well, we'll see. I think they're going to end up finishing third. So Mercedes is going to have more win tunnel time than Red Bull and Ferrari. Hopefully that works. They seem to know where they went wrong. Hopefully that works. And we'll see. I think Mercedes, they cannot be this bad next year. Touch wood. They can't be this bad next year. So it's the one lap pace that is a big issue. Race pace, they're a couple tenths off on certain tracks, right? But I think the issue is like on power circuits, the drag that they're getting on that car is just insane, and the straight line speed is awful. We saw Lewis struggle in Japan. We saw how they struggled. Tracks like Monza, I think they struggled. And anywhere that requires power, they're not good. So that's a big area where they need to push up. Slow medium corners, they seem to be fine, but straight lines and fast corners, they don't seem to do great. So hopefully they'll be better next season. Ferrari, I think they're not far. They're not far, Ferrari, and it's a fixable problem what they've got. I think, that's something I remember Mercedes having in 2013. I mean, all of the Mercedes cars really, before the turbo hybrid era, used to chew tires. Like that was a big thing, in that they could qualify well and they could start races well, but they would go backwards. But it's a fixable problem, and I guess that's all around aero as well, and we'll see. But
apparently we need Ross Brawn to arrange like a private Pirelli test for us.
God, what would you guys give for a little Pirelli test?
Can you imagine? The thing is, can you imagine that on Twitter now? It was bad enough at the time, but
Ferrari, it's but that's the mad thing. I remember saying this. Ferrari used to be the FIA darlings, right? They used to be Ferrari that could do no wrong. Ferrari that would get away with things, and we're seeing that become Red Bull. Red Bull seems to have really got very very caught up with the FIA to the point where it does seem like they get a lot of favourable decisions.
If you look at Ferrari in the early 2000s, though, and the people they had there, they basically owned that.
Yeah.
You had strong support from the Ferrari management, you had strong team management, you had strong people in all the key positions. Everyone knew who they were.
Yeah.
And now it's like Matteo, I think it sort of almost feels like he's left too much on his own. Like he's that one guy there. And you don't know necessarily who like the other people in the structure are, or who the Ferrari owner is these days, or what have you. Ferrari are at their strongest when there's a strong management presence there.
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
So Luca de Montezemolo, Sergio Marchionne was kind of in that mold.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, it does seem as if. What I will say with Ferrari is, I like that they've been patient with Matteo Binotto, and they've obviously got a plan. And I think the days of losing patience with team managers, I guess they saw that didn't really get them anywhere, and looking to kind of grow this team with Matteo at the helm seems to be the way that they want to go, and I think that's good. But it is a departure from what it used to be. They are not the kind of alpha dogs of the paddock anymore. I guess they haven't been for a long time. But it's interesting to see how politically it has changed. And, maybe the fact that, Jean Todt isn't there anymore, potentially, is a factor. But also, like you say, within Ferrari themselves, they just don't have those characters there. And, you don't feel as if they're able to exert the same pressure on F1 that they were, or that Red Bull are currently able to, They were able to get so under.
Lacking influence in the FIA boardroom.
I think they are. And I think it's hurting them. So I think Red Bull and I think Ferrari and Mercedes need to really join together on these issues and look to exert that power between the two of them. I read somewhere that people are they're looking for different sanctions from the FIA. I don't know how much I believe. I mean, listen, all we've got is rumors, and these rumors could have been started by some kid in their bedroom. To be honest, like we've got no clue. Yeah. But for sure, Ferrari and Mercedes need to. Red Bull are becoming very powerful, and we've seen with Ferrari and Mercedes, like you don't want a team or Red Bull as well. You don't want a team running away with it. You really don't. So yeah, let's see what happens.
Yep. I did wonder if it froze again for a minute.
No, sorry.
You're still here.
I'm sat perfectly still.
Well, to explain to people at home, the last time I had Nyasha on the channel, he leaned over a little bit to one side and we nearly lost him off the screen for about 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, I've been perfecting my stance. I've not moved from this point only to get my beer, but I'm just operating my shoulder and not my body. So, yeah. Let me ask you a question quick before I go.
Cool.
We had a nice conversation. I saw that you clipped it. Last week. How are you feeling about content creation? I guess 6 months on now, half a year down the line. How are you feeling about it?
Well, I enjoy it when I manage to do it.
Yeah.
But it's getting that opportunity. It's like by the time I've done like the going to work stuff and the family stuff, and I've got my hour in the evening, and I've been up 17, 18 hours or what have you, I'm not necessarily always thinking up and
Uh,
energetic right now. I need to do the stuff.
yeah.
But when my brain is switched on to it, I'm enjoying doing it. As I said, it's like I know I don't have the time or the resources necessarily to end up doing it professionally or what have
Yeah.
you. But I enjoy an excuse to chat racing, for example.
Yeah, no, it's
If I wasn't
nice.
making content, we wouldn't be talking now.
No, we
So
wouldn't.
it's good.
Nice, nice, nice. No, it is.
Yeah,
It's nice. It's
if
a
other
nice thing,
people listen to it and they enjoy it, excellent.
right? That's it. You gotta be. It's like we said. You gotta love doing it. Otherwise, why bother?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and if we would never have met if we both didn't have this kind of shared interest in F1, and it's nice to, like I said, on Friday night, I'm here. It could be going to a nightclub. I'm here talking F1, and
Oh, you make me feel guilty now.
no. Trust me, no, I am. My partying days are done. So I think it's nice to be able to share passions and have these talks. And I watched F1 on my own for years. I just had all these thoughts in my head. I had no one to talk to, and that's why I started the podcast. I was like, I have got to get these thoughts out there. Like, otherwise, I'm just going to go crazy, tweeting it on my Twitter account, and everyone not giving a damn about it. So, I just think it's always nice to be able to come and do stuff like this and talk to fellow like-minded and knowledgeable fans about the sport, and there's no downside to that, I guess.
Mm.
It's all positive.
Yeah, good stuff. Now you've got to be leaving in theory in 10 minutes. Um,
Yeah.
because as I said, my original plan had been like post Singapore. It was close. It was tight. And Mercedes going to take second off Ferrari. Ferrari could still have a mare of a weekend, which would bring everything back into perspective again. Do you think Mercedes have enough there that they could challenge if that happened?
No. No. Um, I think I don't think the tracks coming up suit Mercedes. I definitely don't think America does. I don't think Brazil does. I don't think Abu Dhabi necessarily does. Mexico might be our best chance for some good results, especially through the second and third sector. But obviously, the first sector with that straight, we'll get eaten alive down there. So, personally, with 3/4 of the races left, I don't think we've got a good chance. I think yeah, it would take some Ferrari mess up. I'm not going to assume that's going to happen. I think Ferrari have made enough mistakes to last a lifetime, to be honest. So
We have
trying to
operationally been slightly better the past few
yeah,
races. It's just because
yeah,
the cars dropped off so much in like the second half of the race or what have you. You don't notice it so much.
yeah, no, you guys have been a lot better this after the summer break, and Mercedes have kind of gone backwards a little bit. We're not seeing that same kind of optimism that we were before the summer break. But we'll be there or thereabouts if someone messes up, or we get lucky with safety cars and stuff like that. But I don't imagine anything bad happening to Ferrari. But I'm looking forward to America, to a circuit of the Americas. It's in my top 5 circuits, top 5 favorite races of the year. I love it. I think it's a great circuit. And I love Brazil as well. So we've got some bangers coming up. So we're going to have some good racing. We're going to have some good races, and hopefully, yeah, that's another little subplot, right? Can Mercedes catch Ferrari? But I think I think you guys have got a bit too much on us, to be honest.
The thing is there's part of me that would like to see Mercedes win. Well, Lewis win at least one race this year, just because there's a certain fraudulent other podcast where one of their guys said he was going to shave his beard if Lewis won a race. And, for Twitter entertainment value, it's worth a shout.
I would love that. I would love that. I'll shave it myself. So, yeah, no, I'd love to just for him to keep that record of having won a race in every year that he's raced in. But also, as Michael said, records are there to be broken, and this is not the way he was talking about. But sometimes, sometimes you just got to let go. And this was such a bad season. It's not a reflection on him, and it's not a stat that, as Hamilton fans, will draw for. I'd like to see someone break that record of winning a race in 15 consecutive seasons or something, 14 consecutive seasons.
A lot, that's for sure.
Yeah, so that's an incredible.
The thing is, if the stat ends this year, it's like not thinking, oh well, it's ended. It's thinking, well, it was an amazing stat.
Yeah, right. It's an amazing run. That's the way that I look at it. I'm not going to look at it as, oh no. We move on. Next season will come. We'll start again. And the stat will be that in the 20 seasons he was in F1, he won a race in 19 of them. Like, do you know what I mean? That's an incredible stat. So whatever happens with Lewis, he is the greatest driver of all time. Anything he does is just adding on to that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the future holds.
Yeah, because in a lot of ways, it's almost like, he's still talking about like getting another contract or whatever else. He's weirdly, Lewis seems to be almost enjoying the racing more because he's actually doing racing.
I think Lewis has always been a competitor, a fierce competitor, and I think he likes the challenge. I think. You know what? I think if he'd won last season, and then this season he'd won, like, let's say he was able to get to 10 or whatever. I think like next season is probably his last season. I think he's looking at this like, okay, they've written me off. They've written the team off. I'm gonna come back and win a title, and I think he's invigorated by this. I think those days where Lewis was umming and ahhing, he wanted to do music and he was really, obviously the Tommy stuff, fashion, whatever. And I think there was a time where he thought, you know what, I could step away and start doing all this stuff. But I think even for Lewis, this is every year he stays in F1 and the sport grows, he just grows his brand even more. So financially, it's good for him to stay in the sport. Sportingly, he now has a new challenge to achieve, which is not just relentless back-to-back championships, but okay, let's get a bad car good for the second time. And the more he does A and B, the more fruitful C will be when he eventually does retire, right? So Lewis Hamilton will be good no matter what he does, but I do think this new challenge and the growth of the sport, he's not going to step away when this sport is still on the ascendancy, right? Like, we've got Vegas race coming up, we've got record numbers of viewing, record gates. Like, this is a great time to be a Formula One driver, and I think if he'd stepped away at the end of his contract next year, I think he'd miss it.
Great. It's practically coming up on the time you've got to disappear off. So I think all I can barely say is thank you very much for agreeing to come on. And it's taken a couple of weeks, but
no, sorry. I think I was I got an old school flu last week. I also think I was a bit run down as well, doing a lot.
So you're a busy man.
I am. I'm not gonna lie to you. I am a busy man, but I think I was overdoing it. And I think sometimes your body's like, you know what, just chill out, sit in bed, do nothing. So I'm sorry that we didn't get to do this earlier, but I'm glad we finally got to do it. It's always a pleasure coming on.
It's good to talk to you.
Yeah, and invite me on again, and we'll have these bi-yearly chats. I quite like them, and I'll see you in 6 months, and we'll see how our teams are doing then.
Cool. Yeah. Hopefully. Well, we start. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how the start of next season goes. Then.
We'll see how the start of next season goes, brother. I'm not confident.
Will we be cheerfully optimistic after testing, or will we be like burying our head in a pillow, going no?
I'm gonna be optimistic. Okay, I reckon everyone's gonna be faster. Red Bull will be slower, and we're good to go. 3-way title fight.
Well, on that note, I will let you get off. Good to talk to you. Thank you very much. And for people watching the video, thank you very much for watching. And have a good evening, good day, goodbye.
Take care.